Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. We went live just a couple of seconds ago, and it's lovely having everyone here. There's a couple of familiar faces and a couple of new faces with us today. I'll introduce them in just a second or two. I'm just waiting for everyone to join us this afternoon. A good afternoon and a warm welcome to each and every one of you. I believe it's a little bit chilly out there, especially in certain parts of the country, so I hope you've either got a nice warm cup of tea or coffee. I can share with you that this is our 9th webinar, believe it or not. The first one actually took place on the 21st of May, if I'm not mistaken. And that was only 56 days into lockdown. Now today we're standing on 105 days into lockdown. But at least we went down from level 5 down to 4, and now we're level 3. So when we started, it was still level 5. But wow, a lot has happened since then. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, we're currently standing on about 341, 42, 43 attendees. I can tell you that we had close to 700 people registering, so thank you very much. We've got over 17 disciplines joining us today, and when I last looked at the registration list, there was 232 psychologists, 99 physios. Come on, physios, you can do better than that. We need 100 from you next time. There was 72 occupational therapists. We had 60 bios, close to 60 speech and audiologists, 25 dietitians. There's 20 medical OPs that's joining us. We've got 15 podiatrists. There's chiropractors. There's GPs. There's 30 optometrists. So a warm welcome to all of you. Please make yourselves at home. And join in on the conversation. You know the Q&A functionality. You can use the chat functionality as well. So we would really like to hear from you and pose your questions to all the panelists. That is absolutely fine. Just in the interest of time, I am going to start. I'm just going to put my chat function on so that I can see that. If you see me glancing to the left, I've got a second screen open here so that I can see all the questions popping up. It's not because I'm trying to look at something else. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lani Ace. I'm a product manager for EZMed, the flagship practice management system from the company Profnet, who is forming part of the SpaceNet Global Group, who is also sponsoring this event and the webinar again today, with the support from EZMed and Medici. As per usual, the webinar is accredited for 1 CEU. So if you registered and you logged on with your own details, you can expect your certificate in your inbox via email within the next couple of days. Perhaps give it until early next week. I do know it takes about 3 to 5 days to get those out to you. Like I said, there's a few new faces that are joining us this afternoon, and I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming Harsha Maharaj and Dr. Unburn Pillai, together with a very familiar face, Neil Kinsley. Now, Harsha is a clinical psychologist with experience in working in psychiatric hospitals, employee wellness services. She had a private practice, but currently Harsha is working in the Santon Mediclinic as part of a specialist breast care program and a unit there, where she consults with both inpatients and outpatients. She also facilitates group psychoeducational sessions in the psychiatric ward. And when I spoke to her earlier this week, she did tell me that apart from her passion for her work and obviously her family, is that she loves coffee. And she was a bit late in joining the webinar this afternoon. Why? Because she was making herself a nice brew. So, Harsha, thank you for joining us. Also joining us this afternoon is Dr. Unburn Pillai. Dr. Pillai is a qualified family physician who's been in private practice for over 20 years. And I know he's got a special interest in chronic disease management, digital health solutions, and also outcome-based care. Unburn was appointed as the CEO of SIPA, that's the Alliance of South African Independent Practitioners Associations, back in August 2016. And I know he's also serving on the board for IPAF, which is the Independent Practitioner Association Foundation, as well as the UFFP, the United Forum of Family Practitioners. Now, Unburn was one of the founding members of the Digital Healthcare Association of South Africa back in 2018. So, Unburn, welcome, and thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this afternoon.
Thanks. Thank you, Lani.
Another founding member of the Digital Healthcare Association is, of course, Neil Kinsley, our third guest speaker, but a very familiar face to us. As you know, Neil is the Medici CEO for Africa and an absolute thought leader when it comes to telehealth. So Neil, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me once again.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for waving. There's still a few people joining us. I hope everyone is finding a comfortable position for the rest of the afternoon. Now, we specifically asked Harsha and Unburn to join us this afternoon because between Neil and myself and a range of other guest speakers, we've covered numerous topics, especially around telehealth. And those included how to navigate telehealth, how to future-proof your practice. We discussed some of the do's, some of the don'ts, how your desk setup should be when you're working from home, what you should be dressing when you're doing telehealth, and sort of consulting with your patients via telehealth. And we also spoke about how to build patient trust via a telehealth platform. We discussed other things like ethical billing, and last week was a very exciting conversation when we had the acting registrar and CEO of the HPCSA, Dr. Quinda, with us, when we discussed ethics and the HPCSA. If you are interested in watching any of our previous webinars, please log on to our website, which is called EZMed.solutions. You can see it on your screen there. Just navigate to the webinar tab and you will find all the links there to the previous webinars. That's also the place that you can go and register for any of our next webinars. But sorry, back to Harsha and Unburn and why they're joining us today. We want to, and I'm sure the audience also wants to hear from the front line, from actual practitioners who's using telehealth and telemedicine in their practices. And that's why they also agreed to join us today. Now, Neil, I know I normally start with you, but this afternoon I'm going to look in Harsha's direction. And Harsha, perhaps you can give us an indication. In your practice, what sort of triggered you to start incorporating telehealth into your practice?
So, Lani, one of the biggest reasons was I had a patient that I'd been seeing for quite a while, and he then moved to, well, out of Joburg and wanted to continue his therapy with me because he just couldn't find somebody that he felt comfortable enough with. So he contacted me and he says, you know, I'm not finding anyone that I'm really gelling with. And I've seen you for 2 years and now having to stop and then start with somebody else is just too much for me. Would it be possible for us to do online or telehealth sessions? And this was a good couple of years ago. So, you know, there wasn't stuff like Medici or any of these programs. So we used Skype. I wasn't very comfortable with it, but at that point it was the best that we had. And so we did a couple of those sessions until eventually he moved back to Joburg, and then we carried on with our normal sessions in person. But that was a big trigger for me. And it's also kind of made me aware of, you know, building up a psychological or a relationship with a therapist takes time. And the telehealth spectrum just makes it so much easier to do that, where you're able to continue that relationship, even though your patient isn't in the same vicinity as you.
How did your patient accept that?
I think at that point, he was just grateful to be able to see me on a weekly basis. I mean, we used to have our sessions once a week without fail at a specific time. And when I said to him, you know, you're moving and perhaps it's time for us also then to look at you seeing another therapist, it will be easier for you. And initially he was like, okay, fine. And then he tried it out. It didn't work for him. And he came back to me and he says, I'd like to try this. I'm technologically savvy. I do a lot of my meetings online. I'm sure it won't be that different.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an easy adjustment for him.
Perhaps not as easy for all patients, I presume?
Definitely not. I mean, what I'm finding now is that a lot of patients still do prefer the one-on-one in my consulting rooms. But other patients, on the other hand, find it a lot easier in that they say to me, you know, especially now with the pandemic, it's safer. We understand that it is an adjustment and they're happy to make this adjustment. It doesn't change who I am as a person. It doesn't change who they are. It's just I guess the environment is slightly different in that they're at home and not in my office, which is usually their safe space.
Sure. Now you were talking about the pandemic, Unburn, I'm sure in a a family practice, a GP practice. I know, as far as I'm aware, you've got a testing center with you as well for COVID-19 patients. Surely this pandemic has had a huge impact on your practice. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think for all general practitioners, it was quite a shock to everyone. I mean, we were the essential services. We got ready. We had our PPE at an exorbitant cost, and there were just no patients. So the first 2 months of the lockdown, most practices saw about a 75%, 80% drop in numbers. So I think for us, we expected a surge, but I mean, I think the lockdown did what it was intention, which is, it kept patients home. Unfortunately, it kept all patients home, even our chronic patients. And so as a result, most of the practitioners in those first 2 months, I mean, a lot of the specialists actually closed. I mean, some of the ophthalmologists, they probably went down to 100%. I mean, they were just no patients going into hospitals during April and May.
My goodness. Now, you've obviously got a knack and a passion for the digital world and using that in your practice. Am I correct when I'm saying that you've been practicing telehealth and telemedicine for quite a while?
Yeah, so I was part of the early pilots with one of the funders. And so that was back in 2017, I think, where we piloted it. And so it was still quite a bit of a learning curve. It's something that we needed to get used to. There was lots of issues at that stage. But I mean, at that stage, I realized that, going forward, telemedicine is definitely something that we need to look at as part of what future GP practice is going to be. I did a lot of work in some of the NHI pilots, and I think if we looked at some of the NHS and how they've coped with the numbers, telehealth and telemedicine was one of the first things that they implemented to get to those numbers that we're going to have to see. So it was something that there was a big pilot for general practitioners to see how we were going to capitate these numbers. And telemedicine at that stage was one of the solutions that we put into the model itself. So it was a combination of what we currently have at the moment and what the future practice is going to look like, and how we're going to cope with volumes of patients should we look towards an NHI model. Sure.
Now, Neil, I'm sure you and Unburn have worked closely over the years, especially part of the digital forum. Is this what you expected? Did you expect something like COVID to all of a sudden let telehealth thrive? Or were you thinking, no, there's going to be a time and a place for telehealth? And Neil, you're on mute.
Sorry, there we go. I mean, I think that, both Unburn and I did expect that there was a time and a place. And I think I've mentioned this before, and I refer to it quite often. I think it was 2 years ago, December time, there was a really interesting article in the Fortune magazine. And they had predicted that in 2016, by the end of 2016, up to 60 to 70% of consultations would be done on a virtual basis. What really happened is that COVID just brought that forward probably by a year, about 2 or 3 years. So I think we always expected it. But, there's something that I've got to point out here, and that is both Unburn and Harsha have been using telemedicine pre-COVID. They'd already made it part of their practice long before COVID actually hit. Yeah. And there's a key takeaway in there. And that is, first of all, it takes some time to get your patients into telemedicine. I think that sometimes you expect that, well, we've put it into the practice and, my patients are just going to use it. And I think people have experienced that that's not the case. People are creatures of habit, I suppose. And it takes a little bit of time. And they have created a practice where it's not just one single channel of health delivery. Traditionally you have a single channel where the only way to get healthcare delivery is I need to go and see my doctor in his rooms. Mm. What they have done in their practices is they have more than one channel. They've got, the one-on-one basis, and they've created a secondary channel, which is virtual. And these are fantastic examples of how telemedicine has been incorporated into a practice, and they have managed to come up with a system where they have a hybrid of digital and personal intervention. And that is really where you want to get, you want to get to. So I'm really excited to hear what they've got to say, how they got there, what their thoughts are on getting, keeping patients into digital health. Because, we talk in theory, and I can give you examples of what I've seen in practices, but here you've got two people that have managed to build a telemedicine practice. And what a great opportunity to hear from both of them.
Absolutely. Harsha, there is in fact a question from you. The question is, I'm just going to read it. Apologies for looking to the other screen. Going from face to face online, I found it relatively easy for both the client and myself. But starting with a new client online seems to be a little bit more tricky. Perhaps you can just share your experience and your advice around that.
Well, you know what I found is that, especially when we were in lockdown, I had a lot of new referrals from doctors who knew that, patients didn't want to come into the rooms. And I get a lot of my referrals from the doctors at Sandton Mediclinic. And initially it was like, oh, this is going to be hard. But again, I think it's also about the way in which you set up your telehealth practice.
Mm.
It's about understanding that, yes, this is going to be an adjustment for both, I suppose, more for the patient because they're expecting you to see you in person. And then as a professional, you kind of want to create that professional environment, which you're able to do with telemedicine. Making sure that the space that you're in is quiet. And just by providing that space for the patient, irrespective of whether it's a new patient or an existing patient, it becomes a lot easier. Yes, there are a few challenges, especially for a patient that's expecting to see you in person. But again, it's also the message that you're putting across. That, listen, I'm comfortable with this. I know this is a challenge for you, and acknowledging that to your patient, that yes, this is possibly something that's new for you. But as your therapist, I'm comfortable with this. I have been doing this for a number of years. So, any fears that you may have with regards to that should be allayed by just being honest with your patient.
Absolutely. Thank you. Neil, I see you sitting there and you're smiling. I think you perhaps agreeing with Harsha on this case. I know you quite often write articles about this and how to win your patient's trust, for example, and you shared a few tips with the audience a while ago. Perhaps you can just run us through one or two of those again.
Sure. I mean, I think there's just, I'm loving what Harsha is saying because she has made telemedicine an integral part of her practice. And she's actually made it a part of her consulting, part of her consult. And the best referral that telemedicine can ever get is from, your trusted provider. And she's saying to the patient, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm comfortable with this. I've done this before, and she's coaching her patients into making sure that they have a safe space where that's quiet. And she obviously reassures them around data integrity and security. And I think that is such a key takeaway because the only way that telemedicine will really succeed in a practice is that it has to become part of your everyday consulting routine. In a GP's practice, and Unburn will tell you this, I think, and he does this, I know, is that where he sees a patient where he could potentially have seen them, he will then refer them on and say, you can use a virtual platform. This is how we do it, and helps them and coaches them along, for the next time. And she's made that part of her practice. And that is that's exactly one of the tips that I gave on one of the other webinars, is that in order to make this successful, you've got to believe in it yourself. If you are not the first person to say, I'm loving this, and I trust it, and this is going to work for me, your patient's never going to do it either. Mm. And I can see Unburn smiling there because I think he knows exactly what I'm talking about. The provider has to accept this, he has to make this part of their practice. And I think that's your point, Harsha, and you've just seems to have done that really, really well.
Yeah. So Unburn, I know you guys do use telemedicine and telehealth in your practice. How did you incorporate it? Come on, give us some pointers there.
So I agree with Neil. I think you need to, firstly, you must want to do it. And, pre-COVID, it was interesting. We had so many doctors specifically who were very anti-telemedicine and were anti the whole point of this virtual, non-clinical, non-touching process. And today, I think majority of those doctors, if not all of them, are using telemedicine in their practices and are the biggest advocates for it. So, we've seen the shift. And I think it's just, I think people didn't understand the potential of what could be done and how we could do things. And it's become a norm now. And I think initially when we started off, we had to explain to patients, we had to get the buy-in from the patients. But most patients were comfortable if it was initiated from our side. So if it was something that they heard or read or were told to do, they weren't as keen as if the doctor said, listen, I've done your test, this is what I need to do, don't come back in, I'm going to do a telemedicine consult and we'll go through your results that way. they were very comfortable to do it. So it definitely, the initiation from the patient starts with the doctor being comfortable and the doctor using it.
Yeah, because if the doctor's all rattled about using a different type of platform, obviously the patient is going to be.
Yeah, and I think the patient, the patient doesn't necessarily, if the doctor's comfortable to do a telemedicine consult, the patient's not going to be worried about, okay, I didn't have my, blood pressure checked, for instance, on that occasion. The doctor says, look, this is, I'm quite comfortable to say, look, this is, so remember initially, pre-COVID, we weren't seeing new patients. We were always seeing existing patients. And so, on our chronic patients, there's a patient who've been to us, and we were using it a lot for follow-up visits. We were using it for results. We were using it to do counseling. We were using it to give feedback or just to check on the patients, how they're managing on the insulin. So it was a lot different to what it is now.
Oh, sure. I can believe you. And do you think the age of the patient plays a role?
I think the age of the doctor plays a role as well.
Yeah. You say that, but we were having this conversation just before, before this started. I was saying, intuitively, you would think that it's probably the younger, more tech-savvy provider that jumped onto this. I mean, we see from our, just Medici usage stats that it's actually not the case. We're finding the older provider tends to be the one. But I want to talk to a point that Unburn brought up now, and we had this conversation many times. We would in the Digital Health Association forums that we would have, and he made the point about that there were a lot of providers out there that were anti-telemedicine and saying, well, you needed to have that hands-on approach, and yet they would deal with their patients on WhatsApp and SMS and emails, etc. It's exactly the same thing. It's just not formal, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we did a poll, and we asked everybody, and how many people do telehealth? And I think the result was about 40% said we use telehealth. And then we said, well, the rest, do you use WhatsApp and SMS and emails with your patients? Yeah, we do. That is telehealth. It's exactly the same thing. It's not in a formal platform, but that's so. The amazing thing about this is that doctors are not doing anything different. They're actually doing exactly what they've been doing for the last couple of years. It's just become a lot more formalized. I think that COVID has brought to the fore things like data security, ease of use, different types of functionality, the different platforms that are available. It's made it a little bit complex, but I think that people are a lot more aware, consumers are a lot more aware of it. And as we've said many, many times, it's going to be very difficult to put the genie back into the bottle.
For sure. Neil, you touched on something there, and it relates to security. Harsha, I know when we spoke earlier this week, you mentioned that when you try and get your patients to engage via your telehealth platform, you have a conversation with them, and you almost try and steer them away from other social media platforms. Can you maybe just sort of, not repeat, but just give us your opinion about your conversation with your patients?
Security is extremely important because of the content of which, what patients share with me is often very, very confidential. And patients initially were like, oh, but is this going to be secure? Can't we rather use, say, for example, WhatsApp because it's encrypted on both sides? And I said, that's fair enough. But what if your partner or somebody gets hold of your phone and they access your WhatsApp? With Medici, it's different because we know it's encrypted on both ends, but it provides an extra layer of security. And again, it's explaining this to them to say that I'm comfortable with this because I'm aware of the security features within the program that make it safer in many ways. It's so easy nowadays to hack into things. And really, do you really want to be having an SMS or a WhatsApp conversation with your therapist?
And does the majority of your patients then agree to join you on the Medici platform after you explain it to them like that?
They are definitely a lot more keen when I've explained it to them in that way, yes.
Wonderful.
Neil? Let me jump in here. Unburn, here's a question for you. I was just going through the questions here. This is a great one, and I know that you're just going to love to answer it. Question is the HPCSA going to allow telemedicine post-COVID-19?
Okay. So I get asked that question. I get asked that question a lot. So the first thing I say is that as the Digital Healthcare Association, we were one of the organizations that pushed for the change. We met with the minister twice. We met with the Health Professional Council. We drafted letters. We actually, we did a lot of work to get to this stage. In the conversations that I had with Dr. Quinda, as much as the current legislation says it's for the period of COVID, there's two things. One, they know that, and they've agreed that they want to continue the discussions with us to see how that post-COVID period looks like. But I also think that, COVID's not 1 month or 3 months. I mean, COVID could go on for years. And I think already in the last 3-4 months, we know that telemedicine has become a norm. It's become ingrained in the doctors, in the patients, where a lot of the issues that were there before, they've almost sorted themselves out, and doctors have been much more responsible in terms of how they deal with these issues. So I think going forward in the discussions that we're going to have at the Health Professional Council, I think it's a really different lens that the Health Professional Council would look at, because the majority of patients and doctors are now using it in a way that they felt wouldn't necessarily be used. So from my side, we're going to push continuously so that post-COVID, whether it be 2 years or 3 years, that this legislation be updated. I think, if we look at what's happening globally, I think, South Africa is lagging behind about 4 or 5 years in legislation.
Thank you, Unburn. I would really everyone attending today to go and listen to the conversation that we actually did have with Dr. Quinda just last week, where he answered the same question, and it definitely wasn't a big no from his side. What he did say is that we can't ignore the fact that not everyone, that a lot of healthcare providers and patients are now using telehealth platforms, and that they will seriously consider continuing with this. He can't put his head on a block and say, yes, it's going to be like that, but it will be taken under serious consideration. So please go and click on the link on our webinar page and do go and listen to Dr. Quinda actually talking about this exact same subject.
There's an interesting question from an anonymous panelist. It says, they wanted to know what would happen if a patient reaches out to the doctor and the doctor says, you need a physical examination, you need to come in. Does the patient pay for the telemedicine consultation as well as the physical one afterwards? And I'll give Unburn a quick chance here as well. But certainly in my experience, you'll probably find that 50 to 60% sometimes of virtual consultations are not charged for. And it would be quite probably, I would say, unethical, if you like, to even try to charge for, just saying you need to come into my practice. So the answer is generally no, but I will tell you that there's still a benefit to it, because I'll tell you why, is that when that patient walks into your practice, you already know what the issues are, and you've probably got a fairly good idea of, what's going to happen. So generally no, and I'm sure Unburn would probably agree, that kind of consultation would not be charged for. And the patient will only pay for the face-to-face consultation.
So from a billing point of view, I agree 100% with you. I think most doctors would do that. If it was a very obvious case where within the first 10 seconds of the telemedicine you knew that this is an emergency and the patient needs to go to a casualty or needs to go into a practice, I don't think any doctor is really going to charge for that consult. I think there's a little bit of a case where often you would see a patient for a condition, you would do a script and tell the patient, well, if it doesn't improve within 2 to 3 days, please you come in for a physical condition. I think that's a little bit different, because there you would provide a service and the patient is given the option to say that, look, I'm not 100% sure what's going on, but if this medication works, fantastic. If not, I think you need to come back in rather than do another telemedicine consult. So I think it depends a lot on what that clinical case is. But what we've been seeing in majority of doctors is we actually don't charge in telemedicine for a lot of those follow-up visits. It's really just to check in with the patient, make sure the patient is fine, follow up on a few things. It's a very quick consult. It's not a full consult. And for that, we don't charge.
Okay. Harsha, this might be a bit of a personal question to you. Stop me if you don't feel comfortable answering this. We've been speaking a lot about charging for patients. Do you charge your patients for using the telehealth platform, Medici?
I do charge my patients for using a telehealth, the Medici platform. And these are patients that schedule appointments with me. But if, for example, a patient is having a bit of a rough time, messages me through Medici, and I respond to that, I don't charge for that. That's always been the case. If a patient says to me, I've had a really rough day, I just quickly need to find out something from you. Have I handled this correctly? And obviously it's done through the Medici app, and I respond through the app again. I don't charge for that, no.
Okay. But if you have got a scheduled session, you do charge. How do you do that? And I'm going to sneak in another question here. Have you actually been paid for these sessions by some of the medical aids? How do you manage that?
So how I manage it is because, EZMed has incorporated Medici into the billing system, and I use EZMed as my billing system. It's pretty easy to then just bill for the session through the EZMed billing system.
Okay.
So it just makes life so much easier. And yes, I have been paid. Medical aids have been paying me for all the sessions that have been scheduled and that I have billed for.
That's good to know. Thank you. Good to know. There was another question in here that came up from, there's so many coming, and I'm trying to keep up with it. Neil, I'm first going to go over to you. There's a question around ethics here and about recording on both sides. Now, we have discussed this before, but maybe just your take on something like that, please, and the consent that needs to sit on both sides.
Yeah, it's a very complex legal issue, recording of this consultation. But I've often asked the question, if you wanted to record a session, do you record the session if you're in a face-to-face environment? And generally the answer is no. So why would you record this one? But there are a couple of other issues here. Where do you store it? Because it needs to be stored safely in a secure environment. It's going to be extremely costly to store it properly. You're going to have obviously have consent from both sides. And it's funnily enough, I've actually had the question quite a lot from practitioners who say, how do I stop my patient from recording a session? If I don't want them to record it, how do I stop them from recording it? But both sides, obviously, you would need to have express consent from both sides before recording is done. It's such a difficult, I think it's almost a personal preference in a way. I'm not sure if I'd be comfortable doing if my practitioner asked me to record the session, because they don't, if I go and see Unburn, he doesn't record me in his rooms. Why would you do it now? Makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, like there's something that we need to record because if something goes wrong, so it sort of just takes away the credibility of virtual care, I think. It's not something that certainly not in the US, where I work a lot on. It's not something that's done often at all. There's a whole bunch of regulations around that. So it's not something that we deal with there much. I want to ask a question of Harsha, and that is, Harsha, in your patients, do you find it as a particular demographic that is more open to telemedicine? Do you find it's more younger? Do you find it more older? What do you find? Because there's an interesting question from somebody who's saying that they're finding in their psychology practice, they're finding that their younger patient tends to be more resistant to it.
Well, I must say, what I've found is that because I have a wide range with regards to age in my practice also, a lot of my patients, the older patients were like, this seems like a good idea because of the risk we'd be putting ourselves in coming to see you at the rooms. So they've been quite open to doing the telemedicine. As for the younger ones, it wasn't a big jump for them in any event, because it was a thing of, okay, well, I do meetings online, so this is going to be the same. As long as I get to see you, I'm happy.
Yeah. So you're finding it pretty much across the board?
It's across the board. I've had a couple of patients that have been like, oh, I'm really not comfortable. And the reasons have been that, I've got young kids, I don't have a nanny with me, I can't find a quiet space to be able to do this. And that's understandable.
So it's not necessarily against the platform itself.
No.
It's just the environment is not conducive.
The environment that could sometimes be a challenge, and not so much the platform.
Do you think your patient needs to take a bit of responsibility there?
Yes, I do think so. I do have certain expectations of my patients. I'm trying to create a professional environment, a safe space for you to be able to chat to me. And my patients do take a degree of responsibility, but I do put out the expectation also that, I need the space to be quiet. And for most patients, they understand that. And because of the type of information that gets shared in my sessions also, most patients, if they can't find a quiet space in their homes, I've had patients that have said to me, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be sitting in my car while we do this session, but this is the quietest space that I can find right now. And I said to them, as long as you're comfortable and you're aware of your surroundings and you're aware that, there isn't anybody around you that may overhear what we're talking about, I'm fine with that. So there is that expectation that, it's going to be a quiet space. It's going to be confidential, so that it isn't a thing of, but how did this person find out about it? It couldn't have been from me. I mean, if your spouse overhears you saying something, it's not going to be coming from me. It's going to be coming from you because they've overheard you during the session.
Sure.
That's the one expectation. I think the other expectation, and this is a bit hard, having a decent Wi-Fi connection makes a huge difference as well.
For sure.
I know a patient at the moment, and we've had to reschedule about 3 times because she's in the Free State, and they've had load shedding and a whole range of challenges. And she keeps saying to me, "I'm so sorry." And I said, well, this is the way it is, unfortunately. If you were here, I'd see you in person. You've got to learn to kind of just roll with the challenges.
And people adapt. I think you have to ask yourself the question, is it better seeing her 2-3 times in short snippets because of load shedding or the Wi-Fi that dropped than not seeing your patient at all?
Precisely. And this is what I said to her also. I said, I'm happy to see you for 15 minutes today if this is all we get in, as long as I know you're okay and we're able to deal with the most important things. And this is what I say to them also. If you're having interruptions in your Wi-Fi, in your connection, identify what you want to talk about, the most pressing things, and let's focus on that. The other stuff can wait until your connection.
And manage that expectation up front. Engage with your patient and say, we know there's load shedding. The Wi-Fi might drop, but let's re-engage again and make another appointment or another consultation time.
So there's an interesting comment that's just come up, and it may have been a chiropractor, I think, who said the hands-on professionals obviously have a harder time with telemedicine, and it's such a valid point. But I think the point has to be made here, and I think both of you will agree, that telemedicine is not and never will be, and never meant to be, take the place of a face-to-face consultation. Never. And it will never. And I think everybody will agree around that. And I think you've got to separate, and why I'm saying this is that I think sometimes people think, well, because I'm in a profession that requires hands-on, I need to be in physical contact with my patient all the time, telemedicine will never work for me. My chiropractor is on telemedicine, my physio uses telemedicine, and my biokinetist uses telemedicine. Now, they use it for me for follow-up. How's that injury going? Because I pick up running injuries and I pick up cycling injuries, and how's it going? So it's all about follow-ups, and it's about, they very often will attach a video to show me a specific exercise on how I should stretch and how I should handle certain muscle strains and so on. So that is where telemedicine works for those kind of professions where you still need intervention with that patient, but it could be post the first time that you've seen that patient. Unburn, I don't know if you've got some comment on that. I think you're probably finding your practice the same.
Because you've got a lot of follow-ups.
So I see a lot of chronic patients, diabetics and hypertensive patients that we do use it for. But I agree with you. I think COVID is unique because what it did was, we went from a very low base to a very high base of usage. And I think at some stage post-COVID, it's going to find a norm, but it's never going to replace the hands-on or the clinical. I think, we always, especially for general practitioners, I think it's different for different disciplines. But I mean, we're always going to need to examine the patients. There will be a time when a lot of that examination could be done digitally with wearables and things. But I think, we're still going to have that majority of patients, 60-70% of patients, that will come into the practice. I think we'll probably get to a stage of 20, 30, 40% of patients that will then use telemedicine. So either for follow-ups. Also, I think COVID, what it's created was that a lot of acute things happen on telemedicine and chronic things weren't necessarily focused today. And now in COVID, we've seen a bit of both. We need to see those chronic patients. We need to do scripts for them. We can send them blood forms. They can go and get their blood tests. We can discuss the results with them. So we don't actually need to see that patient because we've known that patient for 10, 20 years already. Sure. And it's just easy. We can manage all those things via a solution. What I also found from our side when it came to the data is that a lot of my patients, unfortunately, don't have the the bandwidth to do a video consult. And we do a lot of hours on texting, and it works fantastically well. I don't think, that the texting feature for me should be a norm, should be part of every telemedicine solution, actually. Because a lot of the times there's not a need, and we do very short consults. There's not a need for us to have the video consult unless, and for what it's worth, if it's a skin lesion, they can take a photo and send it, as opposed to physically do a video consult. And so that kind of hybrid thing works very well, depending on what the condition is and how comfortable the patient is.
Yep.
And, from our side as well, whether we need to do a video consult or can we just do this entire consult on a text basis.
I think that's a very important point that you're raising there, Unburn. I think a lot of healthcare professionals think telehealth is only video. But it is. It can be other things as well. And I know Neil loves using the word synchronous and asynchronous. Neil, do you maybe want to tell the audience that what the difference is between the two and the do's and don'ts between those?
Yeah, I mean, but you almost sort of set me up for my soapbox on this issue. You make such a valid point, and that is that you generally, people think that telehealth is all around video. I tell you what, I've said this many times, I think it's very, very hard to bring patients into a video-only telemedicine system. We do this all the time, so we're used to this. Patients are not. I mean, I know, I'm going to give you a great example. I know with my wife, for example, first Zoom session, like, no, I don't want to, my hair doesn't look good, and I don't put the camera off. That's normal, and we get it. So it's not the norm for people to have to go onto a video, and they prefer texting. Why do you think that they reach out to their doctors on email and WhatsApp all the time? Because texting is what they know. And the thing about texting is that it's asynchronous. The patient and the doctor don't need to be available at the same time. The problem where you only have video is that the patient and the provider have to be available at the same time. Now, this is not efficient for a provider because in general, the cost that you're going to charge, or the charge that you're going, the cost of the consultation is probably less, on average around 30%. More or less. Why would you now engage in a video consultation with a patient, getting charged 30% less where you could possibly see that person face to face? That is inefficient. So what telemedicine is supposed to do, it is supposed to free up your practice so that you can see that you're able to see the patients who need to be seen on a hands-on physical one-on-one basis and use telemedicine using text, video, whatever it may be, to deal with the ones that can be done virtually. And text, I can tell you, takes up probably 60 to 70%, as Unburn has attested to, of consult. Yeah. Because it's very quick for a patient to just go, I can send out, I send a text to Unburn all the time. Hey, doc, not feeling so good today. I need a script for this and that. He might come back to me in half an hour, whatever it might be. But he's still been able to extend care to me, but in an asynchronous way. So that's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. And I'm a very strong believer that telemedicine does need to incorporate a mixture of text and call and video calling. Yeah. And that's pretty much, and Unburn, that's exactly what you've said. So thank you for doing that for me.
And Neil, Medici does incorporate all three of those?
Yes.
Text, voice, and video?
Yes, voice, video, and text. And even on our platform, we're seeing, that even from the consults doing, around the world, the majority are still via text. Here's the other thing, there was a question that came up about phone calls. Is phone calls part of telemedicine? Yes, they are. Of course, it is. In the theory of and the definition of telemedicine, yes, it is. The problem that you have is that there's no audit of it. There's no audit trail. Yeah, so if you ever need to show that you had this intervention with this patient without involving your patient, it's very difficult to do unless you're using a formalized platform like a Medici that has that audit trail of text and phone calls and videos, etc., that is being put through to the EZMed.
Absolutely. So I think Neil and myself might be a little bit biased here because obviously we speak on behalf of EZMed, a practice management solution program, and Medici, which is a super secure telehealth platform. But a month or two ago, we integrated these two products with an absolute seamless transition from doing your virtual consultation or your telehealth consultation with your patient on the Medici platform, capturing some of the notes there. You can even capture your ICD-10 codes there. Now, if you are using EZMed, like in Harsha's case, maybe you can attest to that and just tell us your experience about that in a second, Harsha, is all the information that you captured on the Medici app, because it's integrated with EZMed, it will actually pull straight through into EZMed, and it is securely and safely stored in there as well. So you're keeping that A to Z track record, your whole health record of your patient. And then from that point, because you've already got some of your clinical notes or part of your clinical notes, you've got your ICD-10, you can change it if you need to. All you need to do is to add your procedure codes. Now, what makes EZMed so brilliant is if you're not sure if this ICD-10 code can be used with that procedure code, or this procedure code can be used with that procedure code, EZMed will lead you to choose the correct ones, the ones that are most applicable. And if the one doesn't fit the other one, it will actually give you a warning and say, be careful, really reconsider your code combinations here. Because if you first send it into the medical scheme, if you switch it electronically, it might reject and bounce straight back at you. And then there's a delay in payment, and it just causes an administrative burden and extra time and extra money for your practice. So try and get it right first time, submit it, and get your remuneration from the funders. And that's what makes this integration between EZMed and Medici absolutely perfect for this. Asa, I see you shaking your head there. Are you in agreement?
I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying, Nani, because that's exactly it. It's just because everything gets pulled through, it makes things a lot easier. It's also a lot less administrative time that you're spending on, trying to do your billing and trying to figure out, okay, how long was I busy with this patient? If it was a telephonic consult, let me check, on my phone, how long was I busy with the patient, and whereas with everything being pulled through into the EZMed system, it just makes it so much easier. Even with regards to the billing codes, with regards to, your ICD-10 codes and all that kind of thing, EZMed just makes it very easy. Even if you're unsure of the ICD-10 code, you've got an option of basically then saying, well, I think it's schizoaffective disorder. What is that? I can't remember it. Type in schizoaffective, it will give you the code. So, that's what makes it so easy.
Easy mobile and intelligent. I'm not sure if the audience actually knows that EZMed, you can even use it on your phone. So if you had a telehealth conversation using the Medici app, which you use your phone for, or your laptop for, or your desktop, you can, walk to the kitchen while you're pouring yourself a cup of coffee, enter all the codes on your mobile phone, and immediately submit it to your medical scheme. So it's extremely mobile, it's extremely easy to use, and very, very efficient. Very efficient.
Lani, from my side, I just wanted to add, I think what Neil said about the audit is so important. So it's an audit has to happen for the medical aids. I think more and more of the medical aids are not keen on a telephone call because there's no proof that it was done, and there's no real way to track it. And we've seen that coming more and more, where a lot of the funders are saying, well, we'll pay you higher for a solution that's on a platform versus just a phone call. And I think that's gonna, as we evolve, I think we're gonna see a lot more of that. But I think it's also a very important thing from our side, is from a medical legal point of view. Because if you don't have your clinical notes and what we call our SOAP notes,
yep.
And you don't have a record of it, and you can't go back and retrieve it, then from a medical legal point of view, I think that's where a lot of the practitioners are going to be in trouble, because it's very difficult to now prove he said, she says on a phone call.
Yeah.
Based on, if we're doing a texting, or we've got some form of record or audit trail, that's something that we can use. The SOAP notes are there. And from a medical legal point of view, should we need to, we can go back and always retrieve it. And I think, again, that type of platform, it's why the Zooms and the Skype calls, a lot of them are being used now. But I think as we go forward, we're going to see the malpractice companies saying, guys, you have to have proper clinical notes. And if you don't have the proper clinical notes and proof of the proper clinical notes, then, we're not going to cover you for those platforms.
For sure.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
2-3 years down the line, sorry, Neil, 2-3 years down the line, if you get audited or there's a forensic investigation against you, you are not going to remember whether you had a conversation with your patient via WhatsApp, via the phone, was it SMS, was it email? So at least with Medici, and especially with the integration with EZMed, you've got it all in one place, and that's what you need. Sorry, Neil.
Yeah, So, Unburn, you've just answered the question that came through from Haley, who asked about doing telephonic calls and WhatsApp and charging for them, etc. And was it ethical to do so? Because, you know, it has been done for so long. But, and I mean, you just answered it so well there. I just want to add in as well is that, you know, while you have a duty of care to your patient, you also have a duty of care to the data of that patient. And ensuring that whatever platform that you use has the highest level of data security and integrity that you can possibly get, I think is part of your duty of care. I mean, there are just, folks, there are just so many, you know, examples where this has gone wrong. I don't know if anybody saw, I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, quite a well-known surgery in the US that was generally does plastic surgery. Their database was hacked, and the hackers obviously held them to ransom and said, well, if you don't pay us X amount of Bitcoin, we're going to put all the names of all your patients who've had this and that done. And then the hackers figured out that they could do the same to the patients.
Oh.
So, you know, you have a duty of care. So my answer to Haley's question, and I hope I'm answering it sufficiently for you, Haley, is that I think that there are so many platforms out there that have this data integrity for you, that is safe, that does have an audit trail, that it's probably preferable to use one of those than a business platform or a phone call.
Sure. I think your dogs are agreeing with you there, Neil.
Yeah, as usual. That is that's the great thing about telemedicine. You know, it's just, you know, you're at home, and I have dogs and kids, and
it's just real life. It's human.
Real life, absolutely. And you know, we did a webinar on this a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you know, how to prepare your patient, and I think it talks to what Harsha said, and that is, you know, it's okay to prepare your patient to say, I am working from home. And I do have small children, and I do have noisy dogs. But please understand that I'm completely 100% invested with you and in this telemedicine session, and my concentration will not be waived from it.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
you know, I set that up right now just for you. Just to
Thank you. Harsha, with your practice, did you manage to continue your practice and keep it open during especially the early stages of lockdown? Especially from a financial point of view. Obviously, a lot of healthcare professionals had to completely close their practices, but I think in your case, you managed to continue treating patients on different platforms, whether it was face-to-face or then using Medici.
No, I definitely was able to do that. I mean, in the beginning stages of lockdown, you know, what the clinic had also done is that they said to us as consultants and as, you know, doctors having rooms, if you can limit the number of outpatients and move to the telemedicine platform, we would appreciate that. And right at the beginning of lockdown, I came into contact with somebody that had tested COVID positive. So even a week before actual lockdown, I was in self-isolation. And I had to let my patients know that, listen, this is what has happened. I am still practicing. I'm happy to see you online using Medici. And a lot of my patients initially were like, oh, I don't know, you know, maybe we should just wait a bit. But then when lockdown got extended, and then I started getting these calls from patients like, we really do need to see you, and we're happy to try out this new format. So I've been working throughout the whole lockdown.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Unburn, I also know in your practice you continued using telehealth. Do you think it is valuable using it just from a continuation of care point of view, so that a patient doesn't have to skip from one doctor to another doctor?
Yeah, 100%. So we started using it obviously pre-COVID, but what happened in COVID is it became a very powerful tool to manage our patients who were either in quarantine or isolation. So for quarantine patients, a lot of the anxiety around waiting for the results. Initially, the results took a day, so that was easy. But you know, at the moment, it's taking 4 or 5 days for the result. So a lot of the patients are sitting at home waiting for the results, very anxious. You know, and this is an opportunity for us to reach out to them and check and make sure they're fine. But for the patient to test positive, that's been a really, really good place for telemedicine. So the minute the patient tests positive, you know, they go into self-isolation. But we know a lot of percentage of patients will deteriorate, they get the happy hypoxic, the sats go down. So currently what we do is we've there's a few options. Obviously, if a patient can afford to, we script them for a pulse oximeter, which they then buy from a pharmacy. You can get it over in an online, delivered to your house. And one of the funders now are paying for pulse oximeters where they will deliver it to patients who test positive. So having a pulse oximeter, which is not an expensive tool, it's about 400-500 rand, maybe a little bit more now with the prices. We can manage that patient at home. We can easily pick up when that patient is deteriorating. We contact that patient, you know, at the specific days where we give them a chart where they monitor their temperatures, their blood pressure, or their pulse, their heart rate. And depending on the readings that we see, we can pick up issues and problems much sooner than if the patient had no contact at all with the doctors.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think most of the doctors are using telemedicine a lot now to manage their COVID patients. Remember, 70% of patients, 75% of patients that test positive are mild and moderate. They should be at home. You know, they're not going to be in the hospital settings. We want to keep them away from the hospitals. And out of that, there is a certain percentage of patients that will deteriorate and need hospitalization. The challenge is, how do we know who that patient is? And so, you know, with using telemedicine now, using the pulse oximeter, we can pick that up, you know, completely clinically in a patient at home and say, look, your stats were 98, now they're 92, I'm not that happy. They're 90, okay, fine, let's arrange an ambulance to do an admission. Sure. And we do that on telemedicine. You know, and for me, that's been just amazing. I mean, it's really for the COVID period, I think it's been one of the best things that we've managed to put into play. And I think that's for me is how we need to manage our COVID patients. And we're going to do a lot more of it because we just now, as the minister said, in the eye of the storm, we're going to see a lot more cases. It's going to be much more difficult to manage these patients. And I think having the ability to phone a patient and check on a patient at home is really the only solution we have at the moment.
Yeah. And it sort of protects your other patients as well, especially the ones with chronic problems who still need to go and see their GP. And I think a lot of patients up until now has been too scared to go. So their health deteriorates, and that again puts more pressure onto the health system. And it's something that could be avoided.
Yeah, so that at the moment is a huge problem, both in the public and private sector. We've seen stats coming out of about 30 to 40% non-compliance on HIV medicine, non-compliance on diabetic medicine in that first 2 months of lockdown. And so a lot of patients were just so scared, they didn't want to go to the pharmacy, they didn't want to go to the doctor, they just stopped their medication. And I think, unfortunately, you know, post-COVID, we're going to unfortunately have a lot of uncontrolled cases. And having the opportunity now to deal with those patients, to phone them, to check on them, and to say, well, you know, what do you need? Can we give you a script? I think that's going to help us. And so we already started doing that. A lot of the practices, we've put a lot of protocols in place, both for those chronic patients where we now passively contact them. We've got one of the funders who've set up a program where they will pay us to contact the patient passively and initiate it from our side. So that's something that I think, again, it's changed. And the whole way we practice medicine and the way we fund medicine is also changing. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Time has run out. I can't believe it. Just a quick one. There was a question that should all disciplines get consent from their patients before they do telehealth? The answer is absolutely yes. Harsha, do you get consent from all your patients?
I do.
Unburn, you too?
Yes.
Please say yes. Thank you. Guys, we do need to start wrapping up. I'm going to give you a minute for just some closing remarks, but before we get there, just a quick reminder that all our previous webinars, as well as this one, there's a link to them on our website. It is EZMed.solutions. Go to the webinar tab. That's also the place where you can register for next week's webinar. And I am happy to say Dr. Kunda is back with us. He literally just confirmed. So we're going to be continuing our conversation on ethics with Dr. Kunda next week, Thursday at 4 o'clock. Please register and join us. It is a very lively and a very interesting conversation. You will receive your CEU certificates for joining the session via email within the next couple of days. I think you can expect it early next week, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe some last thoughts from our audience. Harsha, we started with you. Let's finish with you as well first.
So I think that on the whole, what I can say is telemedicine is definitely changing the way in which we all practice. But I think it's a change for the better. You know, we've got to kind of move with the times. What Unburn said earlier also, you know, pushing the HPCSA, having these meetings, because we are behind with regards to telemedicine. Telemedicine has been used everywhere else as a psychologist. I mean, I know for a fact that there are therapists all over the world that have been doing telemedicine for much longer than we have been. And I think it's something that we really do need to push for, especially not just for now, but to maintain the continuity of care for our patients, even if they're not able to come and see us.
Thank you. Thank you. Unburn?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we move into this whole new digital practice, I think we're going to see telemedicine as being just another tool that we have as a practitioner. I think it's going to become, like we have a stethoscope, it's going to be something that we use to contact our patient. It's a norm. I think we'll see a lot more innovation happening in terms of AI and wearables that are going to allow us to do a lot more smart telemedicine going forward. And so I think it's an exciting space. I think it's something that's going to evolve, and it's going to continue to grow.
Definitely. Neil, last word, over to you.
I just think it's been great to have two providers on this afternoon that have, to my mind, mature telemedicine practices already. And I mean, I think it's just been so insightful just to get their experiences and the way that they've used telemedicine to change their practice. I just want to thank both of you. It's really been great. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing your first-hand experience with us and the audience. Harsha, Unburn, thank you very much. I'm sure the audience is appreciating it as well. And Neil, a big thanks to you as well. I know you're a very familiar face with us, but you've got a wealth of knowledge in the telehealth department. So thanks for sharing and thanks for your time. Attendees, this is the 9th of July, if I'm not mistaken. So just a quick reminder that should you wish to try either EZMed or Medici or the combination between both, it is available to you and to your practice, absolutely free until the end of July. Do make use of this special offer, see what it is about, see if it is working for you, if it is working for your practice, if it's working for your patients as well. Do go to the website, ezmed.solutions. All the information is on there, and we will gladly make contact with you, even if we need to do a demonstration for you. That's all from us, folks. That's all we've got time for. We did overrun with 2 minutes. I apologize. Stay safe. Please stay warm. There's a huge cold front coming, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you, and good night.